This is generally the time of year most nomads start to think about winter and where we're headed. If this is your first year as a nomad, you may be feeling a bit nervous about heading south. Will there be a place to stay? What will the weather be like? Who will I meet? Well, welcome to the live stream. I'm Joni Zander, content creator and road guide here at TheGalavan. I help women get on the road and become successful nomads. It does help other women find these videos if you like, comment, share, and subscribe. I am coming up on my 7th trip heading south for the winter. Every year it's been a little different, but each year I've made it to the desert Southwest. Tonight I'm going to share my experiences with the process, some of the planning and not planning that I've done over the years, and what you might find when you head to the Southwest. Now, if you have questions as we go along, go ahead and put them in the chat, starting with the question mark, and I will answer those at the end. All right, so my first year, I was all over the place. I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was that I was a new nomad. I started out in September by going to Salt Lake City for a conference, and I headed to southern Utah. I had actually met some people online, and I ended up meeting up with them and boondocking with them. I had this wild idea when I first started that I was going to go to all of the national parks in the 48 contiguous United States, and then in one year, in my first year, and then ship my van overseas. I also thought that I was only going to be a nomad for 5 or 6 years. Well, I am coming up on my 7th year, and I don't see an end in sight at this point. So I laugh about my thought that I was going to see all the national parks because that first year I made it as far east from Oregon as Durango, Colorado. So not very far east at all. But I learned a lot, and it's so funny because when I first launched, I had this whole itinerary. I thought I was going to be just me driving around, seeing all the things. And so I had this crazy itinerary for southern Utah that I still haven't completed. And I ended up doing lots of different things. When I first met up with the folks from the Facebook group, I learned about escapers, and they told me, you've got to go to the annual bash. Well, that wasn't until January. We're sitting in September. And so I was trying to figure out how to fill that time. Ironically, I had never heard of Bob Wells or the RTRs before I started. Even though I'd done 5 years of research, most of my research was on building the van, not on actually being a nomad. And so, anyway, I learned about, I don't remember how I learned about it, but I learned about a van build party that was happening in outside of Lake Havasu City in Arizona. And there I met some people and went to, kind of traveled around at that point. Kind of a long story to say, I met a bunch of people. I traveled around with a lot of folks. I met up with people. And then I traveled back to Oregon for the holidays. And so going back to Oregon in December, they actually had an ice storm. It was great. My van, I was super cozy in my van. It was awesome. And then I ended up traveling down the coast around the new year to get to Quartzsite, Arizona for the annual bash that was starting like a week or so in. So from Oregon to Quartzsite, it doesn't take more than 2 weeks to get down there. even if you're not really hurrying. I do like to do it longer now, but it also doesn't take a lot of pre-planning. I've seen people pre-planning, asking people when, are trying to organize caravans as early as a year ahead of time. Most nomads don't know where they're going that far in advance or when they're going to be traveling. And so if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't have someone to caravan with yet, it's still early. So don't worry too much about that. It's also an easy drive. So if you don't find someone to caravan with, don't worry about that either. I do know that a lot of new nomads do put the RTRs, and that stands for the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. That's an event that happens in Quartzsite every year that is organized by Homes on Wheels Alliance. A lot of new nomads put that as their target, which is a really great target because there's a lot of newbie information that happens there, and it's a really great way to meet other new nomads. Okay, so let's talk about now. I'm coming from the Pacific Northwest. I've also traveled to the Northeast in this summer and come back in October from the Northeast. And in that case, I pretty much just made a beeline to the desert Southwest at that point. So I don't have experience with heading to Florida or Texas. That hasn't been something that I've been interested in. So I'm going to be talking specifically about my experiences heading to the desert Southwest. Now, that's generally like southern-ish Arizona. If you get too high in Arizona, you're going to have too much snow and too much cold. That also can be Southern California. It can also be the coastal areas. So to me, the best places to be in the winter are along the coast in California, especially when you get down farther south. I also really like the Anza Borrego area. Joshua Tree can be really nice. And then all the way across Arizona, Lake Havasu City is good. Parker, Quartzsite. There's a little spot just on the California side from Parker that's called Earp that has some really good boondocking as well. All the way down to Yuma. If you are boondocking near Yuma, you can go to a place called American Girl Mine that has some really great boondocking as well. And that's really convenient to going to Los Algodones in Mexico, in Baja. And that can be a walk across for dental and vision care. So a lot of nomads do that as well. It's also a great place to get some tacos and margaritas and just have a fun day. It's generally a place that you just go for the day and then walk back across. There's a parking lot, makes it really easy. And again, the American Girl Mine is really convenient to that. I pretty much only boondock on the free spots. So the free BLM, in that area, it's almost all BLM. There are also some Arizona State Trust lands. That's a little bit trickier because you have to purchase a pass, and that pass is actually only good for 14 days per calendar year. So it's not a 14-day spot and then you move like BLM land. It's just 14 days per calendar year. So okay, so I mentioned BLM. That stands for the Bureau of Land Management. That is the federal agency that manages most of these lands that you can camp for free on. They also have some areas, I think there might be 7 of them, called LTVAs. That stands for long-term visitor areas. And there are several in the Quartzsite area, in the Yuma area. They're in that area along the Colorado, so in Arizona and California. And you can actually purchase a pass. I should have looked it up, but I think it's about 180. I could be wrong. I'll put it in the show notes. 180 per year. And that's for like 9 months. Now, 9 months, you really can't stay there that long unless you like extreme heat. So that's generally the most I know people generally stay there is about 6 months. They usually have a dump station, some water, garbage, and vault toilets. But the thing that people like about those is that you don't have to move. So you can stay there. They don't have the 14-day limit. The places that I camp, they do have the 14-day limit. That's totally fine for me because I get pretty tired of a place by about a week or two, depending on who I'm hanging out with. And so I do like to have to move. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me because I want to move at that point anyway. So there's a lot of places in just that area around the Colorado. There's also Cibola Wildlife Refuge has some great boondocking as well. That's near there. Ehrenberg has some boondocking. So there's a lot of places just in that area, in that like Colorado River range, in mostly Arizona, some in California. So I really like the area around Ajo, Arizona, and Y, Arizona. They both have really beautiful boondocking. If you happen to have Starlink, it makes it even easier because then you don't have to, if you care about having signal, that makes it, there are no trees in these areas, in this desert, to really block your signal. So there's lots of areas, if you have Starlink and you need signal, that makes it really nice. Also, going to Tucson in the winter can be really nice as well. Tucson is a different kind of a desert than what you see in the other areas. The other areas, it's mostly what we call desert concrete. It's pretty flat and pretty level. Actually, it's really nice and easy for new boondockers. There's a lot of like washes with little fingers of desert concrete. A couple of things to note: you never, ever, ever want to park in a wash. Do not set up camp in a wash. You always want to be up on the desert concrete, because flash floods, you cannot predict when a flash flood is going to happen, because those could happen. It could rain a long way away from where you are, and the water can rush down. So that's just something to know. There's a lot of weird things about being in the desert for the first time that you wouldn't know unless you know, right? So that's what I'm trying to do tonight, is just to help you figure those things out when you're around Quartzsite. So if you look up Quartzsite, and you look up the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, I think there are 5 different boondocking areas that are no cost. There's the Plumosa Road area. There's High Jolly. There's some areas, it's like Dome Rock, and some areas south of the freeway. So I-10 goes through there. Some areas are south of the freeway, some areas are north of the freeway off of Highway 95. So if you're worried about having a safe place to camp around Quartzsite, really don't worry about that. There are so many people camping. It's really easy to find other people to camp with or camp nearby. It's actually harder to find places where there aren't people to camp nearby. And any of the women's groups or any of the Facebook groups, it's really easy to find people who also want to camp together who might be new. So yeah, so let's see, what else do you need to know about the desert? All the plants are trying to kill you. They're all spiky, pokey. It's beautiful. I was starting to talk about the difference between the desert around Quartzsite and Phoenix and the desert around Tucson. So around Quartzsite, the plants are very small and very sparse. Around Tucson, the plants are actually quite large and beautiful. There's a chain fruit cholla that is usually six or so feet tall, usually a lot of them in one spot. They're beautiful, but also you don't want to get any of those barbs in your skin because they have little hooks on the ends, and they do they call it a jumping cholla because the little sections will fall off the cholla and bounce and bounce on the ground and then jump up. Not to be afraid, it's easy to avoid, but just know that that there's saguaros. So the saguaros are the big cactus that kind of looks like this. They have the big arms that stick up. Like if you think of a classic cactus, that is the saguaro, that big, beautiful cactus. So lots of different plant life, even like the mesquite trees even have spikes on them. So just take the desert gently, I guess. Tucson is a little bit cooler than the Yuma area. The Yuma area is usually the warmest area. So if the area is getting a cold snap, you can travel down to American Girl Mine, which is actually technically in California, and get a little bit warmer. The temperatures are generally highs, the highs, like if it's really warm. The first year I came out, we were getting highs almost 90 degrees. That is unusual. Last year we were getting lows in the 20s. That's unusual, but just to know that those extremes can happen. So you do want to be prepared for pretty warm temperatures and pretty cold temperatures, and those can happen in the same day. So one of my favorite memes about Arizona is actually, welcome to Arizona. Winter is at 6 a.m. Spring is at 10 a.m. Summer is at 2, and fall is at 6 p.m. So just know that you generally get, like, the coldest part of the day is around 6 a.m. just before sunrise. And then the warmest part of the day is generally just before the sun goes down. And you can have a pretty dramatic swing in temperature each day. So let's see if we have any questions. I see 4. Oh, yes. Cheryl in Arizona reminds us that you can get medication in Los Algodones as well. That is a really good point. All right. Seahorse Vista is asking, escapers are primarily nomads working on the road. Escapers are primarily working age RVers, so you don't necessarily, and that's self-defined. So it's pretty much whatever. If you, to me, escapers are a little more, and so just kind of a younger spirit. So if you like to go mountain biking and hiking and things like that, you'll really enjoy escapers probably. let's see here. Oh, I thought I saw another one. Piano. Ah, good point. So I think they're talking about Baus also has good boondocking. Plano a road, that could be Plamosa Road. I did mention that. And if when finding a spot, walk it before you drive. Even desert concrete can be deceiving. Good point. And also in the desert concrete, if you're there early in the season, it's harder to see where people have been driving. But if you're coming there in January, you're going to be able to see where the tire tracks are, and you're going to be able to tell where it's pretty safe to drive or not. But yes, I do recommend that if you're boondocking somewhere you haven't been, or even if you've been there and it's been a while, it's always a walk it and have it be fine than to not walk it and get stuck. Roadside assistance, even if you have the great roadside assistance, doesn't generally go off road. So you'll want to just be safe rather than sorry. All right. Any other questions? I did last year. I actually went down to Baja for a couple of months. I went down. I crossed on the 11th of November and came back at the beginning of January. And then I went to Quartzsite after that. But that can also be a really great place to go. You do need to look up like what you need. There's a really great group on Facebook called it just kind of went out of my head. Something about Baja. Baja Bound. I think that's the organization that sponsors it. But anyway, there's a real, and I'll put it in the comments. There's a really great group on Facebook that has a lot of really good information about going to Baja. And there's also a lot of people have, it's a big group. And so with big groups, you have a lot of comments that can be annoying, but it does have really, really great information. And Baja Bound is a website that has a lot of good FAQs and like, do this, do that, do this. This is exactly what you need. They do offer good insurance to take your rig down to Baja. You do have to have Mexican liability insurance. Your U.S. insurance I believe the only one that covers you is Progressive. That happens to be what I have. If you don't have Progressive, then you also will need insurance to cover your rig. But regardless of what you have, you also need the Mexican liability insurance, and Baja Bound does sell that. I just went with my insurance agent and it was super cheap. But there are some things that you need to know, like you need to have an FMM to cross and bring your rig in. For Baja, you don't have to have an import thing. I know I'm being super specific now, but you don't need that for Baja. And Baja is actually pretty easy. The highways are good. The people are friendly. The food is amazing and cheap. And there's a combination of both boondocking and like paid camping on beaches and that sort of thing. I also recommend that. It's not as scary as it seems like it would be. Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Talk Baja. Talk Baja is the Facebook group. that has just such great information. And it's a good place to actually ask a question as well. And it can be really, really helpful. It's also really helpful when you're actually in Baja and you have a problem. So that can be great. Did I go to Baja alone? No, I went with friends. I actually rarely go anywhere alone anymore. So, yeah, find some friends. There are always groups forming online if you don't know anybody who's already going. Um, and it, although I must say, I would go alone. Like if I didn't find anybody to go with, I would go alone. I would feel comfortable going alone. I would not go without Starlink, though, because there are so many places where there's not even electrical lines, much less cell signal. And so I did find it really helpful to have Starlink. If I needed to look something up as I was driving, I would just pull over and plop Starlink up and look up the information. So it's worth it to me to have that. So yeah, any questions about going to the desert Southwest? There, I wouldn't worry too much about critters. I know a lot of people worry about scorpions. I have yet to see one. I know they're there, but they don't seem to be that prevalent. And I know my sister has been stung by a scorpion. It was more like a bee sting than anything else. So, yeah. All right. I'm just waiting for a few more questions. If you have any, let me know. And I really hope that this helps you feel a little more confident as you think about your first adventure as a nomad. This video was helpful. Share it and leave a comment. What great you found. Right. You can always have to have a party comments and